So I'm pretty sure most of you have seen this video. After all, it is my best performing video. By the way, thanks for the 69k. But the reason I'm bringing this video up is because of this clip right here. The heartbeat sensor skit. The footage here was by my boy Psycho, fellow Stats on Duty member, who by the way also got the gameplay footage for the rest of this video, which you'll see later on. This clip is relevant because the process of convincing him to get it in the first place is the primary reason I'm making this video. The conversation went a little something like, hey, you got the clip yet?
I don't know, sleep. I'm feeling kind of lazy.
Hey, if you get the clip, I'll make a Mark 2 video.
Are you serious? Say less, boss.
When you hear the word Quickscope, what is the first weapon that comes to mind? Probably the Tundra or 3-line, perhaps the DLQ, Locust, or even the Outlaw. All of these are valid choices, but what most people don't consider are the Marksman Rifles. Now unfortunately, players tend to only consider the semi-automatics while treating the single-fire ones as simply being worse versions of sniper rifles, when that isn't exactly the case. So in this video I shall be talking about one of the single-fire Marksman Rifles, which just so happened to receive a buff this season, the Mark II. Come to think about it, this is actually the first non-fully automatic weapon on the channel. This was already a very strong underrated weapon that has had a lot of potential since its release. Over time, the devs have been giving it a series of buffs, and with this season's buff, it is quite safe to say that the Mark II is the best quick scoping rifle. Here's why. But before we get into what makes the Mark II good, we should start by talking about what happened to the weapon this season. The Mark II received two simple but very useful buffs. The first change was to its lower arm multipliers, going from 1.4x to 1.5x. This means that it will no longer lose the ability to one-tap to the lower arms in the third damage phase. As for the second buff, the Mark II's base movement speed has received a significant increase, going from 4.37 meters per second to 4.71 meters per second. This also affects its sprint speed since it scales directly off the base movement speed, going from 5.68 meters per second to 6.12 meters per second, which is huge. For context, this is roughly 1.5 lightweight perks. I guess the player character has been doing some mad cardio. And with the buffs out of the way, we can now talk about the actual weapon itself. I shall be comparing the Mark II to the two best sniper rifles in the game right now, the LW3 Tundra and the 3-line rifle. I will also throw in the kilo bolt action since it is statistically very similar. Since we're looking at weapons that can kill in one shot, time to kill is not an applicable metric here, since it would just be 0 milliseconds. So instead, I will be comparing their one-tap consistency. All four weapons here have the exact same lethal zones, that being anywhere above the legs. So as long as you don't have a foot fetish, you shouldn't be having any issues in terms of getting one-taps. When it comes to the fire rate, the Mark II has a faster than average fire interval at 1000 milliseconds or 60 rounds per minute, identical to the Locust without stopping power. The only other precision weapons that can shoot faster than it while having the same one-tap consistency are the LW3 Tundra with the hammer-forged barrel and the kilo bolt action. If you're playing the intended role of a precision weapon, that being staying back and picking off enemies at a distance, this is a pretty inconsequential stat, since it is quite easy to control the engagements you're taking at those ranges. But since the Mark II is a quick scoping weapon, this is a pretty useful trait as you'll be dealing with more aggressive encounters where being able to land follow-up shots can be a lifesaver in cases where you miss or are dealing with multiple opponents. So a faster fire rate will help to increase your odds at getting the next shot off. And that is the perfect segue into our next section, that being the handling. This is easily the second most relevant component on a precision weapon, as this determines the time it takes before you can accurately land the shot. So when you think about it, this is basically the closest thing to time to kill on a sniper/marksman rifle. The Mark II features an incredibly fast ADS time at 247 milliseconds. This is way faster than any other sniper rifle, and is only beaten out by the kilo bolt action, which is only a frame faster at 60 FPS. But ADS time is not the full picture here, as there is another aspect of handling that we have to look at, that being the Blankscope accuracy. For those who don't know, your weapon's bullet spread doesn't immediately snap from the hipfire to ADS spread once you fully aim in. Instead, your spread gradually tightens as you ADS. This is especially useful for single-fire weapons, as this means that within closer ranges, you don't have to fully aim in to be accurate enough to hit the shot, effectively resulting in an even faster ADS time. Now this is a hidden stat that is not shown in the in-game comparison chart, so you would have to test it out yourself. So I got Alpha from the Stats on Duty team to test the Blankscope accuracy of these 4 weapons. Keep in mind that this is tested within 20 meters, the range where Blankscoping is most useful, and at 60 FPS. What you'll find interesting here is that you basically can't Blankscope with the Marksman Rifles, as you pretty much have to be fully aimed in to be accurate. With the sniper rifles, you can shoot a couple frames earlier and still be reasonably accurate. But given that the Marksman Rifles have much faster ADS time, this is a fair trade-off, because honestly, if you could Blankscope with a weapon that handles this fast, yeah, you basically have a shotgun that can cross-map. By this point in the video, most of you are thinking, okay, so why shouldn't I use the Kilo Bolt action over the Mark II? That gun has the same one-tap consistency, but with a faster fire rate and slightly better handling. Well, this is for 2 main reasons. The first one is hit flinch. One of the major cons of the Kilo is the high hit flinch at 3.62, which for a weapon that focuses on quickscoping is a pretty big deal since you're expected to take on more direct engagements with this gun. The Mark II's is much lower in comparison at 2.64, which is actually quite close to the Tundra with the airborne elastic wrap. So when you pair this with toughness, you will have a much easier time staying on target. The other reason is mobility. Just like with most precision weapons, the Kilo has slower mobility than assault rifles, sprinting at 5.79 meters per second. It is better than sniper rifles, but it's still not great. The Mark II, thanks to the buff this season, now has a sprint speed on par with assault rifles at 6.12 meters per second, which is really impressive for this kind of weapon. This means that you can actually keep pace with assault rifles without having to switch to your melee 24/7. And with the incredibly fast handling, you can legitimately treat this as a one-tap assault rifle assuming you have the aim for it. Magazine capacity is standard for single-fire Marksman Rifles at 5. But what makes the Mark II unique here is that unlike the other precision weapons, the Mark II reloads 1 round at a time instead of the entire mag at once. So in those cases where you run out of ammo and need that 1 extra shot, you can just load in 1 round, which is much faster than other weapons that have to reload the entire mag. But if you have to reload all 5 rounds, it will take quite a bit longer. But before you go ahead and replace your Tundra, there are a couple of things that you should be aware of. The first downside of this gun is the penetration. Since the Mark II is a Marksman Rifle, it has medium penetration, the same as assault rifles. This means that you can't shoot through heavy materials such as metal, and it is straight up impossible to one-tap through any form of material, even with FMJ. So if you like to spam within firing range, this is not the gun for you. The other drawback is a lot more subjective. The Mark II being a Marksman Rifle doesn't come with a scope. To some, this can be considered an upside as you get a much wider field of view, reducing the risk of tunnel vision, and making it much easier to use in closer ranges. But the trade-off here is that you lose quite a bit of precision, since the lack of zoom means that enemies appear much smaller on your screen, especially if you're using sync ADS to FOV. So at mid to longer ranges, you might have a harder time landing shots accurately. It also doesn't help that the base iron sights aren't very clean either, which will force some players to use an optic. Due to these reasons, the Mark II isn't exactly suitable for the conventional sniper playstyle. But if your goal is to purely quickscope and sign up for FaZe Clan, the Mark II is easily the best option here. You have great one-tap consistency paired with an incredibly fast ADS time, and unlike the Kilo Bolt action, you have way more manageable hit flinch and mobility, making it much more reliable in comparison. The 3-line rifle does have the benefit of a scope for better visibility, while still having a very impressive ADS time. But that gun is noticeably slower in terms of fire rate and mobility, so you can't play quite as aggressively. The Tundra is the jack-of-all-trades sniper that is competitive at everything but doesn't excel in any one specific field, with its ADS time and hit flinch being nowhere as good. So this is supposed to be the part where I talk about the build, but as I was editing this video, I suddenly remembered that this stupid attachment exists and someone will inevitably ask me about it in the comments. The 30-30 ammo conversion seems like a great attachment at first glance. Better mobility, larger ammo capacity, double the fire rate, and an even faster ADS time? That sounds batshit insane. What could possibly be the problem? Here. So the moment you put this attachment on, you basically lose all of your one-tap consistency. Within the initial range, you lose the ability to one-tap to the stomach and lower arms. Keep in mind that these are the easiest spots to hit, so this thing is an actual hit marker machine. You also lose the infinite one-tap as its one-tap range is now limited to 31 meters if you're using the monolithic suppressor. Beyond this range, you lose the ability to one-tap entirely unless you hit the head, so you can forget about using this gun for longer ranges. This attachment pretty much turns the Mark II from a great quickscoping weapon to quite possibly one of the worst weapons in the game, as while the upsides are tempting, it's just way too inconsistent to be worth using. So unless you're trying to play for the memes, save yourself the headache and stay clear of this attachment. When it comes to building the Mark II, there is basically only one way to build it. We start by maxing out that ADS time to make it as fast as possible, with the 18-inch sport barrel, MIP sport stock, and the stippled grip tape. Then we use the OWC light suppressor for free concealment, and an optic of preference for better visibility. If you don't spine the iron sights or have a good blueprint, you can replace it with sleight of hand for faster reload speeds. If you like hurting yourself for some twisted reason and really want to use the ammo conversion, replace the last attachment with the 30-30 ammo and use the monolithic suppressor instead to extend its one-tap range. And that covers everything there is to know about the Mark II. Personally, I don't snipe very often, especially in respawns, but whenever I feel like my aim is on point for the day, and I want to use a one-tap precision weapon, this is the one I usually default to. If it wasn't obvious enough from my previous videos, I am very much an assault rifle main, so I can actually use the Mark II surprisingly well, since it's not that far off in terms of pacing, so I don't have to adjust my playstyle as much compared to the sniper rifles. Also, it's just a really fun and rewarding weapon to use. But that's just my experience from using the weapon, so what do you guys think about the Mark II? Do you think you'll be giving the Mark II a go, or perhaps you still prefer using the sniper rifles? Feel free to let me know in the comments, and if you found the video helpful, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. But until then, I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye bye.